My husband slid the menu across the white tablecloth, flashing that charming grin that used to make my knees weak. Now, it just looked like a practiced mask. We were at Nobu, surrounded by the clinking of expensive wine glasses and the hum of Silicon Valley power players. Across from us sat Mr. Yamamoto, a potential Japanese investor who held the key to Mark's promotion. I adjusted my pearl necklace, nodded politely, and played the role Mark had carefully scripted for me, the silent, supportive wife. What Mark didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to ask in years, was that I wasn't just a prop. I understood every single syllable of the Japanese conversation flowing between them. And when I heard what he told that man about me, the floor didn't just drop out. It shattered. But I didn't scream, I didn't flip the table. I just listened, and I planned. Let me rewind. My name is Elena. For 15 years, I told myself I had a decent life. Not a fairy tale, but stable. Mark was a senior director at a major tech firm in Palo Alto. I was a freelance copywriter. We had a colonial-style home in San Jose, a leased Audi in the driveway, and a marriage that looked perfect on holiday cards. But inside those walls, the air had grown stale. I couldn't tell you exactly when the silence started to outweigh the laughter. Maybe it was after his second promotion 5 years ago. Maybe it was just the slow erosion of time, like water wearing down a stone until it's smooth and featureless. Mark became a ghost in his own house. Important meetings, he'd say, loosening his tie without looking at me. Conferences in Seattle. Late nights at the office. Our conversations turned into a checklist of domestic duties. Did you call the plumber? The landscaping bill is due. Don't forget my dry cleaning. I became less of a partner and more of a personal assistant who shared his bed. I told myself this was just the cost of success. This is what marriage looks like in your 40s, right? You trade passion for partnership. So, I pushed down that gnawing loneliness that settled in my chest during those long, empty evenings while he was locked in his study. I sat on the couch, doom scrolling through social media or watching crime documentaries I wasn't really absorbing, feeling like I was slowly becoming invisible in my own life. About 2 years ago, I stumbled onto a lifeline I didn't even know I needed. It was 2 a.m., another night of staring at the ceiling while Mark snored with the rhythm of a freight train beside me. I was doom scrolling on my phone when an algorithm served me an ad for a Japanese language app. It sparked a memory, a single elective course I'd taken in university, back when I was just Elena, a girl with a backpack and a head full of wild dreams. I remembered loving the precision of it, the way the language felt like a puzzle where every piece fit with a satisfying click. But then came the corporate job, then Mark, then the house, and that part of me was packed away in a cardboard box labeled unrealistic, shoved deep into the mental attic. That night, purely out of boredom or maybe desperation, I downloaded the trial. I didn't expect much, but as the characters flashed on the screen, the hiragana shapes felt like greeting old friends. The katakana followed. Within weeks, I was completely addicted. Every evening, while my husband sequestered himself in the den to review quarterly projections or mindlessly watch golf, I would sit at the kitchen island, chopping vegetables with my AirPods in, murmuring vocabulary under my breath. I subscribed to podcasts for intermediate learners. I started watching dramas, first with subtitles, then covering the bottom of the screen with tape to test myself. I didn't tell Mark. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because I had learned the hard way to protect the things I loved from his casual cruelty. 4 years ago, I had mentioned wanting to join a local creative writing workshop. Mark had chuckled a dry, patronizing sound that grated on my nerves. Elena, really? You're going to write the next great American novel? You barely have time to keep the house organized as it is. Let's be realistic. He didn't say it with malice, which almost made it worse. He said it like he was explaining gravity to a toddler. After that, I learned to keep my interests quiet. It was less exhausting than justifying them. So, Japanese became my secret garden, a private world where I wasn't just a simple housewife, and I was good at it. Surprisingly good. I practiced religiously, sometimes 3 hours a day. I found language exchange partners in Tokyo via Zoom, joined forums, and read novels. By the time a year rolled around, I wasn't just memorizing phrases, I was thinking in the language. I could follow the rapid-fire dialogue of variety shows and hold complex conversations with my tutors. It felt intoxicating, like waking up a limb that had been asleep for a decade. Every complex grammar structure I mastered was a quiet rebellion, proof that my brain was still sharp, still capable of growth, and that I was more than just a domestic hobby for Mark to manage. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late October, the dynamic shifted. Mark came through the front door with an energy I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He was practically vibrating, tossing his keys into the bowl with a clatter. "Elena, huge news," he announced, loosening his tie as he strode into the kitchen where I was plating pasta. "We are inches away from closing the deal with Yamamoto Tech. This is the game changer, the one that secures the VP seat. The CEO, Mr. Yamamoto, is flying in next week, and I'm hosting him for a private dinner at Nobu. You need to be there." I paused, holding the serving spoon midair. "A business dinner? With the CEO?" "Yes. Yamamoto-san is old school," Mark explained, grabbing a sparkling water from the fridge. "He specifically asked about my family. In Japanese business culture, stability is key. They want to know you're grounded, family-oriented. It's all about optics." He took a swig of water, his eyes scanning me critically, not as his wife but as a component of his presentation. "You just need to look elegant, smile, be charming. You know the drill. The usual routine. The usual routine." The phrase stung like a paper cut, but I swallowed the retort. "Okay. When is it?" "Next Thursday, 7 p.m. Wear that midnight blue dress, the one with the high neck, professional but feminine. And Elena," he turned to face me fully, his expression serious, "Yamamoto doesn't speak much English. I'll be handling 90% of the conversation in Japanese. You're going to be bored out of your mind, honestly, but just nod and smile through it. Keep the wine glass full." My heart did a strange double tap against my ribs. "You speak Japanese?" "Picked it up over the years working with our Tokyo partners," he said, and I could hear the puff of arrogance in his voice. "I'm practically fluent now. It's their main reason for considering me for the promotion. None of the other directors can negotiate in the native tongue." He didn't ask if I knew a single word. He didn't wonder if, in all my free time, I might have learned something new. Why would he? In his mental model of the world, I was static. I was the reliable, slightly boring wife who kept the house clean and looked good in photos. I turned back to the stove, stirring the sauce to hide the trembling in my hands. "That sounds impressive, honey. I'll be ready." After he left to check his emails, I stood there, gripping the countertop. A literal golden ticket had just floated into my kitchen, a chance to be a fly on the wall in a conversation Mark thought was completely private. To hear how he really presented himself and me when the filter was off. A sliver of guilt pricked me for even thinking it, but it was quickly drowned out by a darker, more urgent need. I needed to know. The invisible woman was about to walk into the room, and for the first time, she would be wide awake. The week dragged by like a slow-motion car crash. I spent every spare minute obsessively reviewing business Japanese vocabulary, drilling keigo, polite speech, and listening to podcasts about corporate etiquette. I was preparing for an exam I hadn't registered for. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was just being paranoid, projecting my own insecurities onto a simple business meeting. Maybe Mark really was the dedicated professional he claimed to be. Thursday arrived with a heavy gray sky. I put on the midnight blue dress, paired it with sensible heels and the diamond studs Mark had given me for our 10th anniversary gifts that felt more like obligations than tokens of affection. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what Mark wanted: a presentable, non-threatening accessory, a wife who wouldn't embarrass him. The restaurant, Nobu in San Francisco, was sleek, dimly lit, and smelled of money and raw fish. We arrived 15 minutes early, naturally. Mark spent the entire time checking his reflection in the darkened window, straightening a tie that was already mathematically perfect. "Remember," he hissed as we approached the host stand, his voice low. "Just be pleasant. Don't try to force your way into the business talk. If Yamamoto addresses you in English, keep it short. We need him focused on the synergy, not distracted by small talk about your garden or whatever." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep my expression neutral. "Understood." Mr. Yamamoto was already at the table. He stood as we approached, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Mark bowed, a little too deep, a little too eager. I followed his lead, executing a polite, restrained bow. They exchanged greetings in Japanese, formal and stiff. I smiled my practice smile, looking appropriately lost, and slid into the chair Mark pulled out for me. The evening started in English. Surface-level pleasantries. Yamamoto complimented the view, asked about our drive up from the South Bay. His English was excellent, far better than Mark had implied, accented, yes, but precise and thoughtful. Then, as the sashimi platter arrived, the switch flipped. They transitioned naturally into Japanese. I have to admit, Mark's fluency was impressive. He spoke with confidence, navigating the complex grammar with ease. They discussed market shares, Q4 projections, and technical integration strategies. I sat quietly, sipping my water, occasionally nodding when they glanced my way, playing my part. I understood about 80% of the technical jargon. It was dry, boring corporate speak. I began to relax, thinking maybe I had worked myself up for nothing. Maybe this was just a dinner. Then, Yamamoto turned slightly toward me, his eyes kind behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He said something in Japanese, a polite, soft inquiry about my profession. Before I could even pretend to be confused, Mark answered for me. He didn't just translate, he rewrote my reality. In clear, confident Japanese, Mark said, "Oh, Elena. She dabbles in some freelance writing, but it's really just a little hobby to keep her busy. Nothing serious. She mainly focuses on taking care of our home. She's a bit simple that way." I kept my face perfectly still, a porcelain mask, but inside, my stomach twisted into a knot. Simple? A hobby? I had built a 15-year career. I had clients who relied on me, deadlines I crushed, money I contributed to our joint account. But in one sentence, he had erased it all, reducing me to a bored housewife with a laptop. Yamamoto nodded politely, not pressing further, though I saw a flicker of something confusion, perhaps in his eyes. The dinner continued. The courses came and went: black cod with miso, wagyu beef, but the food turned to ash in my mouth. I ate mechanically, stayed quiet, and listened, really listened. As the sake flowed, Mark's demeanor in Japanese shifted. He became boastful, aggressive. He took credit for his team's work, painting himself as the sole architect of the company's success. It was an inflated, uglier version of the man I knew. But then, the conversation took a turn that made my blood run cold. Yamamoto brought up the concept of work-life balance, asking how Mark managed the stress of such a high-stakes role. Mark laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "To be honest," he said in Japanese, leaning in conspiratorially, "my wife doesn't really understand the complexities of my world. She's content with her domestic life. I handle all the heavy lifting, the finances, the strategy. She's just there for appearance, really. Keeps the house running, looks presentable at events like this. It's convenient. I don't have to worry about a partner who demands too much attention or has her own ambitions getting in the way." I gripped my water glass so hard my knuckles turned white. Convenient. Appearance. Does not understand. Actually, Mark continued, his voice dropping lower, the VP position is practically mine. Once that's secured, I'm aiming for the C-suite within 5 years. Elena doesn't know this, but I've been restructuring my assets, moving things around. I've set up some offshore accounts, funneled about $85,000 into a private fund in the Cayman Islands over the last year. Just smart planning. If I need to make a big move personally or professionally, I need the flexibility to act without being tied down by joint assets. The room seemed to tilt. Offshore accounts. $85,000. He was stealing from us. He was preparing an escape raft while I was still on the sinking ship. Yamamoto looked uncomfortable now. He shifted in his seat. "That is very strategic," he said neutrally. "But surely, the stress." "Oh, I have my outlets," Mark interrupted with a smirk that made me want to vomit. "There's a woman in our legal department, Chloe. She's sharp, ambitious. We've been seeing each other for about 8 months. My wife has no idea, of course. Chloe understands the pressure. We talk strategy, we make plans. It's refreshing to come home to, well, to not have to dumb everything down." I sat frozen. My entire life, 15 years of loyalty, of love, of support incinerated in 3 minutes of Japanese dialogue. An affair. Cheating. Financial fraud. He saw me as a simpleton, a prop, an obstacle to be managed. Yamamoto was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at me, then back at Mark. He didn't smile. The dinner ended shortly after. The ride home was suffocating. Mark was humming along to the radio, pleased with himself, convinced he had charmed the pants off Yamamoto. "I think we nailed it," he said, patting the steering wheel. Yamamoto seemed impressed. "Good job on the smiling, Elena. You played your part well." "That's wonderful, honey," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else's throat. As soon as we walked through the door, Mark headed straight for his home office. "Emails to catch up on," he muttered. I went upstairs, locked the bathroom door, and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the simple wife Mark thought she was. Her eyes were hard, cold. I pulled out my phone and dialed Julia. Julia wasn't just my college roommate. She was a shark. A high-powered family law attorney who ate men like Mark for breakfast. We hadn't spoken much in the last few years. Mark didn't like her aggressive energy, but she picked up on the second ring. "Elena? It's almost midnight. Is everything okay?" "I need a lawyer," I said. My voice didn't break. It was steady as steel. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything. The dinner, the Japanese, the insults, the affair with Chloe, and the money, the $85,000 in the Cayman Islands. Julia listened without interrupting, the silence on the other end heavy with processing. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Okay," she said, her voice shifting into professional gear. "First, breathe. You're in shock. Second, you just handed us a nuclear weapon. Hiding marital assets is illegal. In California, that's not just grounds for a favorable settlement, it's financial fraud. If we can prove he's moving community funds offshore, the judge will crucify him. And if his company finds out he's violating their ethics policy with offshore accounts and an inter-office affair, he's done." "I don't have proof yet," I said. "He just said it." "Then we get proof," Julia commanded. "Don't confront him. Do not let on that you know anything. Play the role he cast you in. Be the simple wife for a little longer. Starting tomorrow, you are an investigator. I need bank statements, tax returns, passwords. If he's moving that kind of cash, there's a digital trail. Can you do that?" "I'm scared, Julia." "I know. But you just understood an entire business meeting in a foreign language while he insulted you to your face, and you didn't flinch. You are smarter than him, Elena. You always have been. Now go get the evidence." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the tub. The fear was there, yes, but beneath it, a cold, clear determination was crystallizing. I wasn't going to be the victim. I wasn't going to be the woman who cried and begged. I was going to be exactly who Mark said I wasn't: capable, dangerous, and very, very complex. The next morning, I called in sick to my freelance clients. Mark barely noticed. He just grabbed his coffee, grunted a goodbye, and left for the office. The moment his Audi pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. Mark was meticulous, I'll give him that. His home office was organized with military precision, but arrogance makes people sloppy. He assumed I was too technologically challenged to understand his filing system. I found the physical files: first bank statements going back 3 years, investment portfolios, tax returns. I photographed every single page with my phone, my hands steady, uploading them instantly to an encrypted cloud drive Julia had set up for me. Then, I turned to his desktop. He hadn't even bothered to log out. I clicked through his folders until I found it. A hidden subfolder labeled Consulting. Inside were the wire transfers. Regular withdrawals from our joint savings, labeled as household repairs or contractor fees, all funneled into an account in the Cayman Islands, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. It added up perfectly to the $85,000 he had bragged about. He had been stealing from our future, dollar by dollar, right under my nose. But I didn't stop there. Julia had told me to be thorough. I opened his email. The correspondence with Chloe was easy to find. He hadn't even deleted it, he'd just archived it under legal. The emails were a nauseating mix of corporate strategy and illicit romance. They joked about his boring home life. They planned weekends away disguised as business trips. One email from last week stood out. Subject: the Elena situation. Once the VP promotion is locked, we can stop hiding. I'm moving the last of the assets this month. The Elena situation will be handled soon. She won't know what hit her. The Elena situation. That's what I had become. Not a person. A problem to be handled. I felt sick, a physical wave of nausea rolling through me. But I kept clicking, kept photographing, kept documenting. I found the emails about the property's 2 condos in San Diego bought under an LLC I didn't know existed. Evidence. All of it. I spent the next 6 weeks living a double life. By day, I was a forensic accountant, compiling a dossier that would destroy him. By night, I was the dutiful wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about his day. I smiled when he touched my shoulder, even though it made my skin crawl. Every time he looked at me with that patronizing smirk, thinking he was the smartest person in the room, I just thought, wait. Just wait. Julia and I met twice a week. We were preparing a shock and awe campaign. We would file for divorce and report his financial misconduct to his company's ethics board simultaneously. The offshore accounts were a direct violation of his employment contract. You realize this is the nuclear option? Julia asked me one afternoon as we reviewed the final file. He will lose everything. His job, his reputation, his money. He was planning to leave you with nothing. He said it himself, I replied, staring at the photo of the Cayman transfer. He's been preparing for this for years. I'm just moving first. We chose a Friday for the execution. Julia filed the divorce papers at the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. By 9 a.m., a courier delivered a sealed package containing the financial evidence, the offshore transfers, the shell companies, the ethical violations directly to the head of HR and the general counsel at Mark's firm. At 9:30 a.m., Mark was served with the divorce papers at his desk. I sat in Julia's conference room, staring at the clock, sipping coffee that tasted like nothing. My phone was turned off. I imagined the scene, Mark, comfortable in his ergonomic chair, perhaps flirting with Chloe on Slack, suddenly having his world dismantled. At 11:15 a.m., Julia's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and gave me a sharp nod. It's done. He's been placed on immediate administrative leave. Security is escorting him out of the building as we speak. I didn't feel joy. I felt a massive, crushing weight lift off my chest, leaving me lightheaded. I stayed at Julia's that night. Mark called my cell 53 times. He left voicemails that spiraled from confusion. Elena. What is this? To anger. You're making a huge mistake. To desperate pleading. Please, let's talk. I didn't listen to a single one. Julia archived them all as evidence of harassment. On Saturday morning, I went back to the house to pack. Julia and a uniformed police officer came with me, a precaution Julia insisted on. Mark was there. He was sitting on the living room sofa, still wearing yesterday's work shirt, unbuttoned and wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. When he saw me, he scrambled up. Elena, thank God, he rasped, his eyes red-rimmed. You have to stop this. The lawyers, the company, do you have any idea what you've done? I could lose my career. We can fix this. I'll fire Chloe. I'll move the money back. We can go to counseling. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking at this man who had seemed so tall, so imposing, for 15 years. Now, he looked small. Pathetic. I don't want counseling, Mark, I said calmly. But why? He practically shouted, stepping forward but stopping when the officer shifted his stance. Because I vented some stress at a dinner? Because of a stupid fling? You're throwing away 15 years over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. And it wasn't just stress. You called me useless. You said I was a hobby. You said I was just for appearance. He froze. His face went chalk white. How? How do you know exactly what I said? I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd given him in months. Because, Mark, I speak Japanese. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The realization washed over him, the dinner, the insults, the secrets he had spilled right in front of me. You understood? He whispered. Everything? Every word, I replied. About the Cayman accounts. About Chloe. About how I'm too simple to understand your world. Well, I understood enough to find the paper trail. I understood enough to hire the best lawyer in the city. And I understood that I deserve better than you. He sank back onto the couch, defeated, burying his face in his hands. I'm done being your decorative object, Mark, I said, turning toward the stairs. I'm taking half. And I'm taking my life back. The divorce took 8 grueling months to finalize. California has a mandatory waiting period, and Mark fought tooth and nail for every penny, despite the mountain of evidence against him. But he was fighting a losing battle. The internal investigation at his firm confirmed the ethical breaches. He was formally terminated for cause 3 weeks after I left. He eventually found another job, but it was a mid-level manager role at a startup in Sacramento, half the pay, none of the prestige. In the final settlement, the court was not lenient. The offshore accounts were disclosed and divided. The hidden condos were liquidated. I walked away with 60% of the marital assets, plus alimony for 4 years while I re-established my career. But the real victory wasn't the money. It happened about 3 months after the papers were signed. I received a LinkedIn message from Mr. Yamamoto. It was brief, polite, and written in English. He expressed his regret over the situation with Mark. But then he pivoted. He was opening a San Francisco branch of his firm and needed a director of communications who understood both Silicon Valley culture and Japanese business etiquette. Your unique perspective, he wrote, would be invaluable. I interviewed the following week. This time, I greeted him in fluent Japanese from the moment I walked through the door. His face lit up a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I had a suspicion, he told me later, over tea in his new office. At that dinner, the way your eyes hardened when he spoke. I saw the intelligence there. I am glad you decided to use it. I accepted the job. The salary was double what I had made as a freelancer. I'm 58 now. That dinner at Nobu was over a decade ago, but I remember it with a strange sense of gratitude. It was the worst night of my life, yes. It shattered my reality, but it was also the fire that forged the person I am today. I ran Yamamoto's communications department for 10 years before retiring to open my own boutique consultancy. I travel to Kyoto every spring. I have a circle of friends who know me, the real me, not the decorative version. I dated a few times, had a wonderful 3-year relationship with an architect, but I never remarried. I found that I quite liked the space I had carved out for myself. Mark sent me an email a few years ago. He had remarried a woman 10 years younger, not Chloe. That fling ended the moment he lost his VP title. He apologized, said he was a different man now. I didn't reply. I simply deleted it. Some stories don't need an epilogue. So, if you are listening to this, and you feel invisible in your own home, if you feel like you are shrinking to fit someone else's small idea of who you should be, pay attention to that feeling. Learn the language. Gather the evidence. Find your Julia. It will be terrifying. It will hurt like hell. But on the other side of the fire is a life that actually belongs to you. And trust me, that life is worth every single scar.